1 Corinthians chapter 11, picking up in verse 23. We're only going to read a few verses tonight. Powerful verses. And I remind you of this. Paul the Apostle is writing to the Corinthian church, and if you don't know, the Corinthian church, they were the biggest bunch of boneheads in the world. I mean, honestly, I can't think of another way to say it right now. They were just so crazy. I'll give you one example if you don't know. They had a man who was sleeping with his stepmother, and they celebrated it. Like, this is awesome. And they're like, and they actually said, this is like the grace of God. Like, isn't this awesome? Like, this guy can have this relationship with his stepmom, and it just displays the grace of God in such a powerful way. And Paul has to write them and say, are you crazy? You know, and just the stuff that Paul had to say to these people is outlandish. The stuff that he had to deal with them. Getting drunk at the communion table because they would use wine, and people would come early and just get sauced on communion wine. And it's just crazy, right? It's like, what kind of a mental church is this? They were so wrong in so many things. That's all Paul constantly did is correct them. So any time, in a sense, that you're reading or I'm reading Corinthians, we got to remember, he's writing to almost like set the record straight. You know what I mean? He's like, this is how it should be done. This is how we should do it. Does that make sense? So communion, when he talks about it tonight, is no different. He's talking to a bunch of people that abuse communion. They abuse the church. They abuse each other. He's like, all right, verse 23. For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the same night in which he was betrayed, he took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you do it, as you drink it, do this in remembrance of me. For in verse 26, as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. There's really only two ordinances that are required in a New Testament church. It's really amazing to think about. And I say that for the simple fact that it's incredibly simple what he's asked us to do in light of his sacrifice. Get baptized, right? Be obedient to baptism. That's an ordinance. And the other one is take communion. Like, everything else is sort of like functional, and you can like work with it in different ways. But there are two non-negotiables: baptism and communion. Those two ordinances, which is an incredibly simple church gathering, isn't it? I mean, that's just like when you think about it, like the two ordinances of the church. But I want to start back in verse 23, thinking about Paul writing to the Corinthians. He says, I received this from the Lord. Now, this is no small detail. A lot of times, Paul reminds us that he received from the Lord directly, which is strange because he had the ability to go to the apostles and the disciples. What I mean is like the Gospel of Luke. Luke was a friend of Paul. He was a doctor. He was a friend of Paul. And Luke was so burdened by the facts and the data and some of the things that were overlooked that Luke, he says it right in the beginning of the Gospel of Luke. I took to set in order the account of what happened with Jesus. He's like, as a doctor who kept good records, he's like, I'm just kind of floored at the stuff these guys are leaving out. That's what Luke says. So Luke went and met with all the eyewitnesses, with the apostles, with the disciples, and he got the entire story factually as it should be. That's why Luke's gospel is incredible detail. And when it comes to archaeology, Luke's gospel is the one we go to, because he lays down street names and stuff that all these years later, archaeologists are just amazed at the accuracy of it. But my point is that Paul could have done that. He could have met with the bigwigs and been like, hey guys, how did it go? What was it like? What did you hear? What did Jesus say? But Paul actually sought the Lord. And just to give you one reference point, when Saul of Tarsus becomes Paul the Apostle on the road to Damascus, for 3 days the man is blind and he can't do anything. But it's just been revealed to him who Jesus Christ really is. Blows his mind, right? And for 3 days, he doesn't do anything but think, right? And what do you think he's thinking about? What does that mean? That Jesus Christ, the one that we crucified, he is actually the Messiah. He had to start going through, because he was a scholar, by the way. He has to start going through all the stories that he's ever learned and the subject matter of the Messiah and overlaying them and all the great doctrines that we have in the New Testament from Paul. Part of them start coming right from those 3 days of blindness, just like, no way. No way. His mind's blown. And so what I'm saying is this. In verse 23, he says, I received this from the Lord. Just please note with me, he doesn't say, I learned this from the apostles, just like I got it from those guys or the disciples. He says, I received this from the Lord. This is huge. This is that the Lord himself revealed to Paul what we should be doing in communion. And it perfectly agrees with exactly the revelation that was given to the disciples that were there that same night. Isn't that awesome? Like the gospel accounts that we have line up perfectly with the revelation that Paul got, which means he wasn't like, oh, I heard from the Lord, but it was like some weird thing, you know? It's like, I heard from the Lord, and this is how he told me it should be done. And so he says, I delivered to you like this. The same night, in verse 23, in which Jesus was betrayed, he took bread. And this is a thing I've made a big deal of in Mark's gospel, blows my mind, that he knows what is ahead of him. He knows that he's going to sacrifice himself. He knows because he's told his disciples, right? Guys, I'm going to be sacrificed. They're going to beat me. They're going to malign me. They're going to kill me. They're going to crucify me. He knows what's coming. But he has the presence of mind to sit down with his disciples and, for the first time ever, institute what we're doing right now, communion together, right? That really blows my mind. Best way I can frame it for you, just remember, like you don't know the day you're going to die, right? Some of us love to plan so much, we'd love to know when we die, right? I like to joke about that. Like some people are such good planners, I'm like, you'd probably love to know when you die so you could plan it better, you know? But the fact is, there are just some things we don't know. But he does know. And what I'm saying is, if you know that tomorrow night, 24 hours from now, 8 o'clock tomorrow night, you are going to be tortured to death. How you holding up? You going to go downstairs and eat dinner with us and hang out like you normally would? I don't think so. Like, I'm out of here. I got to go home and just think and figure out a way out of this or something, right? I mean, your mind just goes nuts if you could even embrace such a thought. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be slaughtered. It's hard to even actually imagine the weight of the responsibility of that, right? Part of dying is the surprise, right? That's kind of the nice part of it, right? And someone once said, it's not dying that I'm afraid of. It's not death that I'm afraid of. It's the dying part that creeps me out a little bit, right? It's like, how am I going to die? I'd like to know that. But to know that you're going to die in a brutal, slow torture, and it's right around the corner. And he is sitting down with his disciples. And he's like, guys, this right here, he takes the wafer and he breaks it. He's like, this is like a representation of my flesh. Going to be broken for you guys. He has the presence of mind to... Now, think about it. As he breaks it from the wafer, the implication is his flesh will be broken. And he knows that. And he's saying it confidently and lovingly, like, guys, this is my flesh broken for you. This is my blood that will be poured out for you. Now, this is amazing, because you remember when he dies on the cross, right? This Roman soldier puts the spear in his side, and blood and water come out. And in a sense, like every drop of blood was poured out that day from him. He held nothing back. He gave his entire body and his blood to us. And he's like, and these are the things that really get me right here. As often as you do this, as often as you do it. Notice he doesn't say like once a month or twice every week or once every day. Any of those would be reasonable, wouldn't you agree? For what he's doing and done for us. To say, guys, I want you every single day to remember me. Be like, oh, that's fair. Right? No one's going to argue like, that's not fair. They're like, I died for you. Oh, all right, you win. I mean, that's crazy, right? He could say once a month. He could say once a week, once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. He says, just whenever you want, as often as you want, whenever you're doing it, just remember me. It's so cool because that's exactly what the Lord's looking for. There used to be a radio program I don't know, they still do it, but it's not the same with Chuck Smith not being there, but it was called Pastor's Perspective. And you would call in and you could ask Pastor Chuck Smith any question you want. It was awesome. And sometimes it's just like, it was like, all right. Some of the questions weren't like great. Sometimes the questions were awesome. And this one time, these guys called and they're like, hey, Pastor Chuck, like, hey, so like we just took communion and like we told our pastor and he's really upset with us. And he's like, well, why is that? And he's like, well, like we're so like inspired to like worship the Lord. You know, like total hippies, you know, like surfer guys, California. And they're like, all we had were Doritos and Coca-Cola. So we took the Doritos and the Coke and we like remembered the Lord and his sacrifice and communion. Our pastor said that's really bad. And he's like, did you remember the Lord when you did it? And they're like, yeah. He's like, that's all right. Good to go. I was like, that's awesome. Doritos and Coca-Cola. I don't recommend it for anybody, but I mean, these guys are just so inspired and they want to worship it like, oh, let's take communion. Oh, we got Doritos and Coke. All right, man. Because that's as often as you do it. As often as you do it. And I'm telling you right now, the Lord would rather have Doritos and Coca-Cola with a couple of weirdos, right, than never doing it at all. Being so busy you don't have time, or doing it in such a way where it means nothing to you with all the right elements. It's a beautiful thing. Another cool thing is a friend of mine says if the apostles could be translated, if you like imagine when they were living, if they could be like brought into the future and set here in church, like if they came up the stairs right now as I'm doing this, and they walked into this building, of course, so much would blow their minds, right? Like going into the future, and they'd see the lights and the sound equipment and the screens and the fans, and they would probably come up these stairs a little slowly and trying to take it all in, like, whoa, we are in the future right now. They'd see a lot of what we're doing, and they're just watching in the back row. They're like, what is this? But the moment that they see us do this, they're like, this is a church. Amen. This is a church, man. We're taking communion. They already know. Isn't that a cool thought? They would know. They would innately know. Oh, we're with brothers and sisters now, man. And I want to say this, because this right here does something so important for all of us. It unites us together. And that's no small thing. The loaf that was broken and the cup that was shared was divided, but would unite as well, right? And I say that because that's no small thing. Think about it in the terms of church. If there's one thing I do wish for, is that there were less churches, plural, and they were just like a big church, like a church, you know? But I get it. I also understand. I'm fully on board with the fact that, speaking of Pastor Chuck Smith, he used to say that the more spiritual a man becomes, the less denominational he is. I get that. And I agree with that. But I also understand that there's a time and a place, and that sometimes people just can't agree on things. It's just so unfortunate. Drives me crazy. And that's one of the things when we have our National Day of Prayer with the other pastors and the churches here, I love talking about unity with them because we are united. We work together. We're on the same team. So fun. And for one night a year, at least for now, one night a year, we get our churches together on the National Day of Prayer, and we just kind of let them all have their time. You know what I mean? Pastor Art gets up here, and the pulpit like lights on fire, and he's Pentecostal. Woo-hoo! You know, it gets whoa, woo, woo, woo. You know, it gets crazy for a few minutes, and then like somber Joe gets up here and reads from the Decalogue, and you're like, it's just cool. We're just all like, wow, we're all part of the church, man. We're all just like the church. But I always love to talk about unity in that moment because that's really the goal, isn't it? Because of all of the different, what I mean is all the differences in church, man, for heaven's sake. This is one of those things that unite us. We can have our doctrinal differences and our beliefs on tongues and all sorts of doctrinal things. But if there's one thing that we agree on across the board is the Lord's Supper. You know what I mean? We all come to the same table. It's not like, no, I believe in a different table. I believe in a different body. No, it's just the body of Christ and the blood of Christ, and we come together and we're united in that. So when we take communion together, we might have our doctrinal differences, or we might believe that Enoch died or not. I mean, we could have our different beliefs in the Bible. But we don't differ on that. We believe that this is the body and blood and that it represents something so powerful to us. And then this. Isn't it, as often as you do it, to me, is like a really small request for such a big thing, right? Like, I don't know how indebted you are or what you, but I'm going to assume most of us in this room don't own our house, let's say. And some of you that do, like you've lived life enough to pay off your house and you're debt-free or something, just go back a few years, remember the pain. But my point is, when you're in debt and someone just comes and drops a big, and they say, hey, I'm paying off everything. Like, whoa. That's just such an amazing elation. Or some of you, you don't even have debt. You've got future student loans and stuff you're looking at. And imagine if someone just said, hey, before you get started in life, you're 17, you're 19, you're 20, you're going to get your life started here soon. Here's $1 million check to get going. Does anyone want that, by the way? Anyone? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, everyone, woohoo, yeah, double hands, 2? Can I get 2? Whether it's, if you need it in a pinch or you have it if someone's paying off debt, whatever your situation is, whoever does that for you or for me, they're kind of special in your eyes, aren't they, at that point? Kind of like when they call, you answer, it's not like, I'm busy. Hey, how you doing, brother? Great to talk to you. You owe them something, right? You owe them so much. They've saved you years and struggle and toil in your life. So of course, they're amazing to you. You're so thankful you owe them something. And imagine, whether you explicitly say it or imply it, you want to know, what can I do for you? But here's the problem. That person that's giving you that, they have everything. So I always say to my friends that have a lot of money, I say, what do you get someone that has everything? Nothing. So I don't give you anything. Anyway, but it's a nice way to not have to buy them something because it doesn't matter, they already have it. But they have everything, right? They have everything. And that person looks at you and says, okay, I'm going to save you the hassle of trying to figure me out and all that I might require from you and all your thanksgiving and gratitude toward me. And I'm just going to tell you this. Whenever you decide to sit down and slow down in your life, just take a moment, eat a cracker, drink a little juice, and say thank you. I can't do that. I've got too much going on. You know what I'm saying? As often as you do it, there's no one in this room that could argue like, Lord, that's a lot to ask. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't like that. I feel like that's a little demanding, don't you think? Anyone feel that way tonight? It's crazy. It's ludicrous. What a small thing to ask. He saved your life. He saved my life from destruction in this life and the life to come. You ever notice that? Because we all talk, I'm not going to hell now. Well, that's wonderful. But when you lived, you were like the closest thing to hell on the earth, right? You were living in a gutter. So he saved you in this life and the life to come. What could I ever do for you, Lord? And he's like, remember what I did with these elements. All right, Lord, you got it. You absolutely deserve that. You will get that from us. So it's all there. But I want to remind you of this tonight. The gospel. Beautiful statement. I think it was Charles Spurgeon who first said it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Charles Spurgeon said, the gospel in 4 words is Jesus in my place. Jesus in my place. In 3 words, it's him for me. In 2 words, it's substitutionary atonement. And in 1 word, it's grace. And grace is that word that's amazing because it's not mercy. Mercy's wonderful. Mercy's not getting what you deserve, right? But grace is getting what you do not deserve. So here you are, here I am, we're on trial in front of a judge. All the evidence is there. You are guilty. Mercy says, well, you deserve life in prison. I'm going to give you 25 years in parole. That's mercy. Thank you, judge. I'm not going for life. That's wonderful. But then someone steps in the courtroom and says, actually, I will take his sentence on myself, and I'll serve his time. So the demand will be met, but I'll do it for him. That's grace. That's not getting what you do deserve, and you're getting what you don't deserve at the same time. So in 4 words, Jesus in my place. In 3 words, him for me. In 2 words, substitutionary atonement. And in 1 word, it's just simply grace. And that's wonderful, isn't it?